We're very fortunate to have Marybeth Gray here with us today. She is a Senior Vice President with Trion. She's worked in the employee benefits field for more than 20 years and currently has responsibilities as supervisor for the account management teams for her current clients at Trion. She is very skilled at analyzing companies' healthcare costs and benefit plans, and an expert in identifying financial opportunities and assisting with strategic planning, with special emphasis on large self-insured clients. Ms. Gray is a member of the National Business Group on Health in Washington, D.C. She graduated from Pennsylvania State University with bachelor degrees in health policy and administration and nutrition. And so one last reminder to everyone to please go ahead and mute their lines if they are calling in on a phone. And Marybeth, are you in the webinar?
I am not, Kelly. I'm having some technical difficulty, which is really unfortunate. So I'm going to log off and reconnect, and we'll start from scratch. But good afternoon, everybody. I know we have a lot of folks on the telephone. We had over 60 people registered for our seminar today, and we will be getting started momentarily. I'm trying to see if we can reconnect and get this show on the road here very shortly. For those of you who may not be familiar with myself as a speaker for the University Conference Center, Kelly and I have worked together for the past 12 years. And by just way of background, why we reconnect, I went to Penn State and graduated in health policy and administration. Went to work for Aetna for about 14 years. I was in charge of national accounts and responsible really for all aspects of my national account partners. So I was responsible for customer service, strategy, from start to end, responsible for client delivery. Kelly, I am back in. I don't know if you can see me. Perfect. I think we're all reconnected here. Fabulous. My stress is over.
Okay, great. One more reminder to all of our participants, please go ahead and dial *6 to mute your phone line. We have several numbers that have called in. We're thrilled to have you listening via phone today, but we do need you to dial *6 on your phone to mute your line.
Perfect. Thanks, Cal. So after working for Aetna, I went to work for Aon, a national consulting firm, as a senior vice president in their Philadelphia office, and really focused on health and welfare strategies and disease management. And for 14 years, now you know how old I am, for 14 years I've been at Trion. And Trion is a division of Marsh. Marsh owns Mercer as well as owns Trion, so we're sister companies with Mercer. Today on our agenda, as you can see if you are connected via the web, we're going to talk about specialty drugs. And for the first time ever speaking, I'm not going to talk about healthcare reform, which is so refreshing to me, so I hope it's refreshing to you as well. We will talk a little bit about the excise tax, though, because the extraordinary burden that specialty drugs have placed on our cost and trend, they are definitely affecting our ability to get under the excise tax threshold for 2018. So we're going to go through kind of, what the landscape looks like in pharmaceuticals today, the struggles that employers are facing, and then we're going to go through some basic strategies and then maybe some more advanced strategies for some of you. And then we're going to talk about what we've come up with as a solution in the marketplace if you're interested in hearing what we've done at Trion for our clients. So real quickly, we're going to kind of set the stage with what's brewing, what's happening in pharmacy, and really what is a specialty drug. So we're gonna start pretty basic and move into the more advanced ideas. But a specialty drug is really new to the market within the last 5 years, and it's a very advanced development in pharmaceuticals. In the past, we have had chemical drugs, right? The flat chemical pills that didn't need refrigeration; they were just a chemical mix that helped target specific diseases and specific illnesses. Specialty drugs, however, are biologics. They're typically injectables, but they also come in a pill form, some of them. And the specialty drugs, they're biologics, they're living organisms. And a lot have been developed to target specific pieces of our DNA. So they're very groundbreaking answers to some of the complex chronic illnesses, and really have advanced our ability to treat certain illnesses where we haven't had success in the past. For the 4th year consecutively, diabetic medications have definitely taken on the front position as far as spend and as far as prescriptions. This is the fastest growing segment. Specialty drugs is driving our trend more significantly than any other piece of trend. And the reason that is the research and development has really shifted focus from generics and our standard name brand drugs more over to specialty drugs. And the reason that is because the pharmaceutical companies are able to make a larger profit margin from these drugs. They're very expensive. And their patent or hold on the technology is a little bit longer than the traditional drugs. So the generic form of a specialty is called a biosimilar, and the biosimilars are a little bit harder to manufacture on these biologic medications. So the pharmaceutical companies really like these because there is a larger profit margin. Specialty pharmacy definitely has accounted for a larger and larger part of our drug trends every year, and we're going to have a little discussion on that with a slide that will show you from 2011 to date how it has impacted our cost and drug trend. But we've seen over a 30% increase in specialty drugs in 2014. The 2015 numbers obviously are still in play. But it looks like that's even gone up a little bit in 2015 year to date. So when you look at the drugs in development, we call it the pipeline. I'm going to show you later on in the presentation what the pipeline looks like for specialty drugs, and you'll be able to see the expense associated with what's being developed and what diseases are targeted in the pipeline. So we have over 7,000 new drugs in development. 29 of them are specialty drugs that are set to be approved by the end of this year. Most are orphan drugs, and what is an orphan drug? An orphan drug is usually an illness that is targeted or has less than 200,000 patients suffering from that particular ailment. And it's really, they're typically, there's no generic form of those drugs targeted for those illnesses. So that's driving our cost. And then the last piece that we're going to talk about today is the coding and quantity issues on the side of the medical piece. So if you look at your overall drug spend, there's really 2 pieces of medical drug spend. One is under the pharmacy plan. The other one is under your medical plan. So we have some issues with coding. We call those J codes. So for those of you who have attended my sessions in the past, I always spend a minute or two on J codes. So we have a lot of oncology drugs that are administered for cancer patients in the doctor's office. And those particular drugs get processed under your medical claims bucket, not your pharmacy bucket. So when you put in clinical programs to manage your pharmacy, those drugs that are going through the medical plan miss some of the protocols and the clinical edits and the clinical programs that you have set up to manage your pharmacy. So we're going to talk a little bit about those as well. The other opportunity really is not just how those drugs get processed and trying to pull some of them back over to the pharmacy bucket so we can manage them, but really the quantity limits. So with some of these biologic drugs, they're extraordinarily expensive. So they're, some are over, most are over $1,000 a month in cost. So one of the clinical management opportunities that we're going to talk about today is really dragging some of those over to the pharmacy and having those managed through a specialty drug branch. That's a specialty drug management company that will help manage the quantity. So if they get a 30-day supply of a very, very expensive drug, what some are putting in place, some employers, that it's worked fabulously, is dispensing a 15-day supply of the medication to the member, making sure that the member can use the drug effectively, that there's no side effects that are inhibitive and would inhibit the employee or the member from taking the drug through the full 30 days. By limiting the quantity that's dispensed, it's eliminating waste and it's eliminating, people who are having difficulty taking the drug become resistant to the treatment. So the last thing that we're going to talk about, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, is the stop-loss contracts. So for those of you who are self-funded, which I'm assuming most of you are, and have your pharmaceutical programs self-funded, you want to make sure, first, that your stop-loss coverage covers your pharmacy as well as your medical. It is amazing to me that I still find employers out there that don't have their pharmacy included under their stop-loss contracts. And with these specialty drugs, you can see some of them are over $100,000 a treatment, which would be very critical to having them included in your stop-loss contracts. The other thing that we found in the last couple of years that's worth taking a look at is under your stop-loss contract, making sure that you have a provision of mirroring. So what I mean by that is your medical plan may cover experimental treatments, including stage 3 trial drugs that are not FDA approved, that are targeted for people in stage 3 or 4 of certain cancer situations. So those stage 3 clinical trial drugs are sometimes not included in your stop-loss contracts. So you want to make sure that everything under your medical plan is mirrored and covered under your stop-loss contract to avoid that issue on the pharmacy with those stage 3 clinical trial drugs. So really, what are we facing, right? And this really differs by employer, but I can tell you that these top 3 are pretty much the same with any employer across the board. We're suffering with high claimants, and when I mean high claimants, we're talking about the sickest people in your population, right? Even with stop loss, you have 20% of your population spending 80% of your dollars. And having had thousands of clients over the last 25 years, I can tell you that it's the same 80-20 rule when you look at utilization. Really, you have 20% of your people typically spending 80% of your dollars. And that's even more clear when you pull in the pharmacy and look at these specialty drugs. Chronic conditions, I hate to be doom and gloom because it does sound like a downer on this slide, but almost 50% of the people in the United States have a chronic illness or a chronic condition. And really what that does is it drives our medical claims, and it also drives our pharmacy claims. And the chronic conditions really are what pharmaceutical companies are targeting our specialty drugs for. And the reason that is because chronic illness people with chronic illnesses, use drugs every day for the rest of their life. So they look at it as, you have longevity in taking the medicine, and some of the medicines, like diabetic medicines, which is the #1 driver, cholesterol comes in at a close #2. People with high cholesterol typically have high cholesterol for the rest of their life, same with diabetes. So, and then the last thing that we're kind of working towards solving is the specialty drug and the non-adherence with the specialty drugs. And we'll mention some of the surveys that have been done that look at non-adherence, not taking your medicines either on time or not taking them at all, and how that affects medical claims, ER visits, doctor visits, and certainly resistance to some therapies if somebody was halfway through taking a medication and quitting. CDHP, so if most of you are on my mailing distribution list and you get my updates, I just sent one out last week. If you haven't gotten one, you can certainly email me and ask to be put on my mailing list. But if you look at the trends, 60% of employers in 2016 are going to be offering a high deductible plan. And with that, what we need to manage on the pharmacy side is adherence. So as the deductibles go up and the coinsurance goes up for individuals, the less adherent they are. So they're not getting their prescriptions filled. They may even be saying, I got a script from the physician, but I don't want to use the money in my HSA, so I'm not going to get the prescription filled. And actually, surprisingly, 30% of people who have prescriptions in hand don't get them filled. So that's something to watch as those consumer-directed health plans really become more prevalent. The looming excise tax, I promised at the beginning of this presentation I wasn't going to talk about healthcare reform, but here we are. So I can't miss a presentation without talking about healthcare reform. It's just not in me. But the looming excise tax is something that we're all managing too. So we're all looking at really, you know, the 10,200 for a single and 27,500 for a family limits in 2018, January of 2018, when the excise tax takes place, supposedly. A lot of people think that's going to change. I don't happen to be one of them, but because they'd have to find $92 billion someplace else. So that tax would generate $92 billion to pay for what they've spent on healthcare reform, setting up the exchanges and the subsidies that are available to people going through the exchanges. So if that doesn't change, those limits, anything over that dollar amount, so for a single $10,200 in total cost, that's going to be taxed at 40%. So that's a big tax. It's a big problem that employers are looking at managing too, and pharmacy is definitely playing a large part in that as the fastest growing piece of trend. So large employers are looking for opportunities. They're looking for ways to reduce their costs, and carving out specialty drugs to a special manager is one of the strategies people are deploying. So you can see on this slide, I just kind of wanted to just show you from 2011 to date, to 2015, how the drug spend has increased. And one of the things that I'll add later on, because I was looking at this morning, is specialty drugs so far in 2015 equate to about 30% of our total drug spend, but the dollar amount is staggering. It's like 70 to 75% of the dollars. So what that means is each prescription is so much more expensive than a conventional prescription of a chemical flat name brand drug, that it's really driving our costs. And if you look at, statistically, if you look at from 2012 to 2013, what we were spending on pharmacy versus what's expected in 2016, you can see that it's a significant increase, billions and billions of dollars. And what's really driving that is one of the top costing specialty drug categories is cancer, oncology. So you can see the 5 classes there of top drivers for the specialty. And we did talk a little bit about adherence and being a big problem, but it's a huge problem. It's $337 billion in the U.S. of waste, and that is people getting a prescription filled and either not taking it to the end or not getting it filled at all, and increasing costs on the medical side. So adherence is a big problem, and if you as an employer haven't had the opportunity to go back to your PBM or your carrier or your TPA and actually ask how many, it's not hard data to get, so to ask them to pull everybody who has a 90-day script, So anything that's going through, hopefully mail order, but anybody on a maintenance medication with a 90-day supply script, and how often they're getting that refilled. And it is surprising. And the answers on really how to manage pharmacy are not the same for every employer, because we have some employers where we go in and we look at the adherence rate and it's really high. And the people are getting their refills on time, people are getting their scripts filled, and people are getting and taking their medication on time because they're getting their refills on time. Where we have some clients that we go out to and we look at their adherence rate and it's way off. And when it's way off, not only is it costing you money on wasted prescriptions that are sitting in people's medicine cabinets and they're not taking, but it's affecting your medical claim and your medical trends as well. Over to the box on the side, you can see there was a Kaiser study last year that looked at diabetics that were over 65 years of age and how many were adherent when they had a 90-day prescription plan. So if you don't have a mail-order drug plan where they can get a 90-day supply for a slightly lower copay, it's usually 2.5 times the retail, that's something that is an opportunity. It saves you money. You get a better discount on the drugs through the plans, and it shows the people who do get a 90-day supply, so they don't have to go every 30 days and get a refill, are more adherent with their medications. And I think you'd see that that particular study was of people over 65. I think you would find the same thing with your general population. So the folks who don't take their drugs, we see more hospital admissions, more ER visits, more family doctor visits, more tests, more labs, and really more therapies needed because of resistance issues. We talked a little bit about the chronic prescription, chronic illness problem in the United States, and that's really driving the cost on the pharmacy side. So now we're going to get into a specialty update. And I know this slide is busy. Actually, the next couple slides are busy, but I just want you to kind of listen while I point out the key points on these. And then when you get the slides in hard copy, you can look more carefully at the actual names of the drugs and potentially get your PBM or your carrier, your TPA, to give you a top list of your top 25 drugs. And then maybe you can look at this list and compare it to your list to see how your utilization is with some of these specialty drugs. So what's contributing to specialty trend? Why is it so? Why is it taken off so? It really has taken off so because there are specialty medications now, biologic drugs, that are best in class at treating some of the core chronic illnesses that we haven't been able to cure in the past. I have some slides on the new cholesterol-lowering medication that was just released in July of this year on the market. And I have some slides addressing hepatitis C, which we all know is that $85,000 per treatment drug. But here's the good news. It's curing hepatitis C. So the beautiful part about that drug is it is actually curing an illness, so there's no medical catastrophes on the back end, like liver transplants and some of the things that we saw with untreated or hepatitis C. That I just lost my, there we go. There we go, we're back. Sorry about that. So some of those drugs are actually solving or curing issues, which although they're very, very expensive, at least it's solving a treatment issue for people. So basically what I did here was I listed some of the factors. So there's new drugs to market that are solving issues that we've not been able to solve before disease-wise. There's therapy administration changes. You know, the path or delivery, it has changed. You know, we used to get injectable drugs at the doctor's office. That's changing, thankfully, and there's less expensive venues or sites of care. So when I say that, you're probably like, what the heck is she talking about? Oncology drugs, as an example. So prior to probably the last 18 months, nobody got their oncology injectables anyplace but their oncologist. And the problem that we were seeing with that was not only the issue that I mentioned before, where they're billing it to the medical plan instead of the pharmacy, but there's also quantity issues where they're taking a vial of that medicine and charging you, the employer, for the whole vial, but they're only dispensing to the member a third of the vial. So there's quantity limit processing code errors that are taking place, and that's contributing. Increased utilization, I mean, let's face it, with 50% of America that has a chronic illness, there are more sick people getting diabetic medication, high cholesterol medication than ever before. And then, of course, you have the final bullet point, the pharmaceutical manufacturers' pricing and marketing. And not to be funny, because I know this isn't a funny topic, but I always look at pharmacy as kind of a balloon. You squeeze fat out of one side, or you squeeze profit, or try to control something on one side, and it just shows up someplace else. So it's a balloon where you squeeze one side and it just goes someplace else. It doesn't leave the balloon. And that's what we're seeing with the manufacturer's pricing and marketing. It really, you can negotiate things, but as the utilization increases and some of the techniques on pricing increase, we're really combating it from multiple sides to try to keep control of things. And on that note, I just wanted to put something funny in there. But we've all seen, those commercials where somebody's running through a field of daisies, and you're watching the commercial. I don't know about you, but sometimes I sit on my couch and I think, what is that a commercial for? Like, what does the actual drug do? And then they start reading off the side effects, and you think, oh my gosh, who would take that drug with all those side effects? But the marketing tools and the marketing campaigns that they have really expanded our knowledge more than ever before of what drug is out there to help what. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the next couple of slides because they're very busy, but I'm just going to point out what I wanted to say on these pipelines. So the next 3 slides are pipeline slides. It's really kind of just showing you for each category of illness what the new drugs are, what the new specialty drugs are. And again, if you haven't run your top 20 utilized drugs for your plan, please do, because I'm sure some of these are on there. So you can see hepatitis C has been, front and center of the newspapers and the conversation for quite some time this year, with Sovaldi coming out and some of the other courses of therapy. It ranges, each drug is a little bit different in cost, and how they're prescribed is a little bit different, between $80,000 and $95,000 per course of treatment. And the problem with some of these hepatitis drugs is the side effects are pretty substantial. So for those people who are suffering from hepatitis C and try one of these therapies, it's really, really important that we manage them in a couple of different categories. And one of the ways that we need to manage them is making sure that in advance to receiving the medication, the person knows how to administer the medication through the injections and has help or can do it themselves, that the storage of the medicine, temperature-wise, they understand, and it's important the expirations. It's important the delivery of the drug because typically it's sent on dry ice and needs to be refrigerated. And then finally, the symptoms or the side effects that the person may experience in the initial onset of taking the drug. So for drugs, that might be new to someone to solve a problem like hepatitis C, if there's flu-like symptoms for the first 5 days, you're going to want whoever is sending that medication to your member to make sure the member understands you're going to have flu-like symptoms for the first 5 days. Please don't stop taking the medicine. You need to take the medicine, and on the 6th and 7th day, if your flu-like symptoms don't subside, then call back this number. And that's part of the specialty drug management and carve-out. That is a part of most people's plans today. So if it's not, we're going to talk a little bit more about that technique or tool or solution in the next couple of slides. cursor wouldn't move. There we go. So the next slide is really just an extension of the first slide. We go through cancer. We talked about the J codes. Cancer drugs, oncology drugs, are very prevalent under the medical plan. We need to figure out what's running under your medical plan and how to drag it back under the pharmacy plan so that we can manage it. Cancer drugs are definitely one of the highest, if not the highest costing drug categories in the world. In 2015, we're set in the world to spend $100 billion on oncology drugs. Very, very, very concerning for people trying to manage costs. Lipidoid, high cholesterol, all of those items fall under the next category. And you can see with the cholesterol drugs, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but that is substantially hit the pipeline and impacted our costs. And then this last slide of the 3 slides is really the pipeline. So some of these obviously have not hit the marketplace yet, and some might have legal issues getting through the pipeline. But once they get FDA approval and they hit our actual utilization, there are things that we need to clearly watch. And the approximate cost of these particular drugs that are set to hit the market are not yet known, but certainly high-costing drugs in the pipeline. We talked about biosimilars. So these are the near-term biosimilars. And a biosimilar is basically a generic for a specialty drug. So you have your name brand drugs and your generic drugs help when the name brand drugs come off patent, they go generic and our cost gets lowered. One of the games that we've seen that you really want to make sure when you're looking at your contract for your pharmaceutical carrier for renewal that you don't have that single source generic verbiage in there any longer. We've stricken that from all of our clients, and I would really, really implore you to take a look at your contract with your PBM or your carrier to make sure that you don't have that single source generic language in there. And basically what a single source generic is the pricing that you're going to get charged is the same as a name brand drug, which is higher than a generic, if there's only one source of a generic, meaning only one generic manufacturer of that particular drug. So that's something that you want to take a look at. You want to focus on, we think a generic should be a generic. Imagine that. And a name brand drug should be a name brand drug. So if it's a generic and it's manufactured by a generic company, it should be less expensive and you should get that discount, whether it's 3 companies making the generic or 1. So the biosimilar is a generic form of the specialty drugs, and you can see the good news is that we really have some in the pipeline that will help our overall cost coming into play. And you can see the intended use for that. Rheumatoid arthritis is definitely a high one. So we're going to talk for a second about the high cholesterol drugs because those have been a topic of discussion in all my meetings lately with our client population. So clients are looking at, when we heard in April that these particular drugs for lowering cholesterol or controlling cholesterol were to hit the market and get FDA approval in the summer, and they did. So why are these so concerning? Well, Lipitor, one of the name brand drugs, was always on our top 10 list. So every single utilization report that I looked at over the last couple of years, Lipitor was on the list. And it's a name brand chemical drug, a lot less expensive, about $100 a month, but always in the top category because we have a lot of people on cholesterol managing medications. So these new specialty drugs that hit the market in July, instead of being $100 a month, are $1,000 a month, roughly. And really they were developed for less than 2% of the population that had cholesterol management issues. And when I say that, it's a genetic defect where somebody taking cholesterol-lowering medication like a Lipitor was not able to bring their cholesterol in check and manage the cholesterol to a good level. So if you think about that, it's less than 2% of the population, we shouldn't have a problem, right? Well, it's being prescribed for a lot more than 2% of the population. Unfortunately, marketing has taken over. People want the latest and greatest. Physicians may not be aware of different copay issues that members will face. And certainly that's one of the reasons that we've wrapped our arms around and embraced the whole consumer-directed health plan, high-deductible plans, because we want people to be more engaged. We want people at the pharmacy to be asking questions like, wow, that's really expensive. Is there a less expensive drug that I can take that would do the same thing? Can you call my doctor and potentially get that dispensed in a generic form? So the cholesterol medications are definitely something that are front and center. Interestingly, Express Scripts, which is one of the largest PBMs in the country, they have actually gone out to their employees. They have, several thousand employees that work for Express Scripts in the mail order drug facilities, and obviously salespeople, pharmacists, everybody that runs their business. They've actually said that this drug is not covered unless you go through clinical step therapy and get it approved. So they've actually gone to the extreme in managing this drug and saying, we're not covering it unless you can prove that you're one of the 2% of the population that can't be helped with the traditional drugs. So I pretty much covered everything on this slide, and what I just said, it's estimated at $12,000 annually. I think the key thing about this particular drug that's so concerning, at least to me, is you're on it forever. So most drugs, like the Hep C drugs, they're expensive, but it's a 12-week course and you're finished. So it is $85,000 for a course of treatment, but you don't need to take it again. You're cured. And for this, you're on it forever, because typically when you have high cholesterol and you're managing it with a serious drug like this, it's pretty extreme, and it's an ongoing issue for you forever, unless you can, modify your health status. Hep C, we talked about this. This really, I just wanted to show you, there's 3.2 million people in the United States with hepatitis C. And at $85,000 a course of treatment, it really is very disruptive to how we manage costs and what we can afford. You can see the increase of hepatitis C has grown in the United States over the years. So we're going to jump into strategies. I need to talk a little faster. So management strategies, this piece is really, this is all good. So when we look at management strategies with each of our clients, we really, we look at each client individually. So an answer for ABC company might be different than CBS company. So the first thing that we do is we do a data dive. We look at your pharmaceutical claims, we look at your trends, we look at your chronic, we move over to the medical piece and look at what your chronic illnesses are, what are your top 10 disease categories. We look at J codes, we pull all of the J codes to see what's running, what pharmacy prescriptions are running through the medical plan. And once we gather all of that data, we can really understand what clinical management, utilization management, and formulary management plans, levers, really, so to speak, we should pull to help you control your costs. So again, it really is a client-specific endeavor. Formulary management has gotten much better. So what is a formulary? A formulary is a drug list. So if there's more than one drug in a category, let's just use hepatitis C. There's several drugs that now cure hepatitis C. The formulary is where your carrier or your PBM, your pharmacy benefit manager company, would go out and negotiate with the manufacturer preferred pricing. And that has really taken front and center with the industry in the last couple of years and saved us a lot of money. So we have been able to go out when there's more than one drug in a pharmaceutical class for an affliction or a disease or a chronic illness, and we've been able to say to that manufacturer, we want preferential treatment and we'll put you on the formulary list. So when you look at your copay structure, you have generic drugs You have name brand formulary, and then you have non-formulary. The non-formulary drugs are a higher copay, so you're really incenting the employee to look at the formulary list, bring the formulary list to the physician's office to make sure that if they have a choice, they're picking something on the formulary list, they save money and you get a better discount. How things get on the formulary list is how this slide is designed. So most of the PBMs are looking at the new drugs coming out. They're doing the clinical review to make sure that they're equal and they're both clinically effective. The efficacy of each drug, there's no significant difference, right? So you're not going to put something on the formulary list when there's another drug that has better outcomes, because you want the drug with the best outcomes so that people aren't taking, the drugs too long and they're not having comorbidities and higher medical claims. And then negotiating the price, and then the continuous monitoring, because this industry changes so quickly, new drugs coming out onto the market daily, it requires a special focus. And interestingly, less than 3.7% of members ask for a clinical exception, which I know employers struggle with that. When you're designing your plan, you don't want a ton of people in your office complaining because your drug that you took last year isn't on the formulary list this year, and you want that other drug. But in fact, we see less than 4% of members coming and asking for an exception. And because we've been able to establish these are the drugs that we prefer because we get better pricing and the efficacy is the same, has saved us money in managing the pharmacy plan. So this slide is really the crux of how we look at the different buckets of managing pharmacy. You have the prior authorization for drugs. I used earlier ESI, or Express Scripts, the largest pharmacy benefits manager in the country, has required their employees or members to have prior authorization if they're going to get a particular drug. This particular drug would be the cholesterol expensive drug that's new to the market. So in order to get that coverage for that drug, they need prior authorization. There's a really good list of things that we recommend you putting under prior authorization, and most of them are specialty drugs. So we're looking at drugs like compounds, the cholesterol medications, hepatitis C. So not only the high-cost drugs, but the drugs where we feel there could be an element of bad behavior, we're going to call it. And the pain patches are an example of that. So we saw earlier this year most companies, most employers eliminated compounds from their list of covered drugs. Pain patches came out shortly thereafter. They were manufactured by most of the compound drug manufacturers. And those pain patches were just taking two basic materials, putting them together, calling it a pain patch, and charging 10 times what the two different ingredients would cost if they were alone. So most of my, and they're not FDA approved, so most of my clients eliminated them from the list and put them under the prior authorization category. Step therapy is also a clinical program that I encourage everyone to take a look at if you don't have that in place today. And the reason that I encourage you to take a look at step therapy is because you're not denying somebody the most expensive drug, but what we're saying with step therapy is we're saying you have to try the less expensive drug first before you jump to the most expensive drug. And I'm surprised that there's still plans out there that don't have step therapy in place. And if you're really concerned about disruption to your current population of employees taking medication today, you can even put step therapy in a grandfathered way. So you're not touching the people that are already on the most expensive drugs. You are saying if you're new to a drug, you have to go through the step therapy process and try something less expensive before you go on the more expensive. I don't like grandfathering, but if you're not going to do step therapy at all, at least do the grandfathered step therapy. And then the drug quantity limits, right? So that is something that we did talk about earlier, and we do need to manage, how much of a drug they're getting. We want to make sure if it's a very expensive drug, they've really focused on how they can manage, taking the drug and making sure the drug works before we give them the full supply. Saves us money and saves the employee waste, and they get charged half of their copay, so they don't mind. And then the next and final kind of strategy that we're going to discuss today, you can tell, and it's no surprise to anybody who knows me, I can talk about this forever because this is what I love to talk about, but carving out your prescription drugs. If you haven't looked at carving out your prescription drugs, there is a financial benefit to doing it. And I understand that you have to reintroduce, you know, the pharmacy data and information back in with your medical carrier for them to do, you know, the adequate disease management and chronic case management. But it really, today, if your carrier tells you don't carve out pharmacy because we're going to lose our ability to do disease management, that is just not true today. Most of the largest PBMs in the country can reintegrate data immediately. It's a 24-hour lag, so that shouldn't inhibit anybody from doing any disease management. And carving out your pharmacy prescriptions, really, you know, carving it out. So you have, let's say you have Aetna as your carrier, carving out pharmacy and moving it over to, you know, an Express Scripts or a CVS Caremark or an Optum Rx, where that particular care, that's all they do is manage drugs. So they're actually really just focused on managing your pharmacy drugs, looking at utilization. You have, you know, the carve out for the specialty, which I think the carve out for the specialty is really important. So I'll give you an example. CVS does it, Optum does it, Express Scripts does it. Let's just use Express Scripts as the example. They have a specialty drug arm within the PBM, within the Pharmacy Benefit Manager. So ESI manages all of your retail drugs and all of your mail order drugs. But if you're on a specialty drug, you go through a Credo. And there's some benefits to that. There's some clinical management benefits. There's some specialization management benefits. And there's definitely more control. If you have hepatitis C and you have a prescription that goes to ESI, for that, it's going through to a Credo, and they have 10 pharmacists that all they do is manage Hep C drugs. They know what all the side effects are. They know how to handle it. They know how to instruct storage. They know how to do the delivery piece of it. And they're on the phones with your members, right? So if somebody has a question, those calls get routed to that department. So there's really specialization there, and it really does affect not only adherence, the members are more satisfied, and it impacts your cost. So it's a win-win-win. So here's some, a slide that just talks about using a PBM versus using just part of having your pharmacy run through your medical carrier. And obviously we talked about all of these. So it's a better negotiated price, it's more focus, it's more clinical management, it's more extensive data analysis. And of course, the only downside that I can see that I've experienced is challenges with reintegrating the data into the medical carrier to make sure that they're doing the clinical management and the chronic condition management that they need to do. And then the other potential downside is carve-out charges. So some of the carriers will charge to reintegrate the data, but a file feed shouldn't be more than $1,000 a month, which the savings of going through a PBM way outweigh that. So this is just an example of how a PBM would help manage a particular condition. We used Hep C as the sample here, where you have special pharmacists that are managing that process and that drug, clinical assessments to make sure that that patient fits the description as in the right category. Because if somebody has hepatitis C and 3 other problems, let's say they have hepatitis C and the unlucky person is sick with some rheumatoid arthritis and on a different medication for that, and maybe has some type of skin cancer and on medication for that, then they wouldn't be a candidate for the Hep C treatment. So that's what the special clinical focus is that you get with a PBM. And we're going to jump right into the final piece of today, because I know I only have about 8 minutes left, really what we've done. So we've kind of worked through all of these challenges that I've just talked about in trying to manage specialty drugs. And we've decided that we have 600-700 clients that we do consulting work for. And things like, the stop-loss with stage 3 clinical trial drugs not being covered because there's no mirroring to the provisions, some of the clinical programs. So we've gone to the largest PBMs. We did an RFP. They're consolidating quickly, so there's less and less of them out in the marketplace, just like the carriers. The medical carriers are consolidating in our industry. But we've gone out and we've said, we have 500 clients. We're not going to renegotiate every single contract with you. Here's what we want for our clients. So we've actually established preferential pricing. We've eliminated things like the single source generics. We've eliminated things where they charge you 25 cents PEPM for every clinical program you add. We have a clinical bundle that's $1, maybe $1.10 at this point, and it includes anything, any clinical program you want to add instead of doing one-off. And really doing a very focused approach to managing your pharmacy. It's that big a piece of overall spend, and it's that big a piece of trend that we feel like we need to do that. So we're getting the lower administrative fees, the better discounts, the guaranteed rebates. I have to tell you, I still come across employers that are taking the deal with the PBM where they keep your rebates and they're waiving your admin fee. That is a scenario where you lose. So don't take that deal. Do the math. The math is 10 to 1. The rebates you get back from the PBM are 10 times what the admin fee is. So you want to pay a small admin fee and get 100% of your rebates. And really just get best-in-class pricing and really control over your plan. So we talked about how we advocate for that. We get the best deal, we manage the PBM with the clinical programs, and then we help with the review and design of those things. And just to kind of wrap up what we're talking about is we go out with every client, we look at your program, we look at your data, we look at your claims, we look at what's driving your cost, what specific categories of illnesses, and what utilization on the drug piece that you have, and then we put a plan in place. And then we manage that plan. And every year we look at what other clinical programs can we put in place. And we try to get out in front of things, right? So back in April and May, I was asking all of the pharmacy vendors to get me, for my clients, how many people are on a cholesterol-lowering medication, because that's your population in July that's going to be using those high-expensive specialty cholesterol drugs to lower your cholesterol. So those are the things that we're focused on here. And then this is just kind of a wrap-up of things that you want to really make sure that you're doing. So whoever you use, you want to make sure that you're looking at your plan design options, looking at adherence, looking at channel delivery, looking at carving out the specialties. So this page really is a summary of everything we talked about today. Channel delivery, mail order drug, 90-day supply, moving over into the clinical programs where you're making sure that there's management of the high-cost utilizers and really minimizing people jumping to the most expensive drug first, and then doing an ongoing financial evaluation of really tracking and trending and looking at how you're spending your drug dollars and really managing those the most effectively. So Kelly, I know I'm coming up on the end, and I apologize, but I do want to have it open for questions. And because I went right up almost to the end of our 1-hour session, if anybody has any questions, I'm always here. I believe we build a community. I really feel like we really need to help one another. So we'll tabulate all the questions that came in, even the ones we don't get to answer today on the call, and send those out to everybody with a copy of the PowerPoint. How's that?
That sounds great, Mary Beth. We do have a couple, but we can wait and you can answer them individually afterwards, or you can answer them, want to take a stab at one or two of them now?
We can certainly. I see some of my friends there, Marilyn Bucro, so she has your thoughts on PBMs that partner with carriers. Currently, we have United Healthcare as our ASO partner, and they partner with Optum. I can't see the rest of her question.
Would there be
Would
any
there be?
difference if we carved out to a standalone PBM like Express Scripts?
That's a good question, Marilyn. I think they're probably, you have to do the actual evaluation. So if you took a look at your Optum deal, so as a consultant, my goal and objective is to not change your carrier if I don't have to. So what I would do is I would take best-in-class pricing and provisions, go back to Optum and say, here's where you're off, compare, what Optum has in place in your contract today versus what the PBM marketplace does. Optum they do sell a standalone, they bought Catamaran, so they do have a PBM, they do have a specialized division. So that particular carrier is a little bit different than the rest. So it's different than an Aetna or a Cigna. United actually does have a freestanding PBM, and Optum is very good at what they do. So I would actually just bump your clinical programs, your pricing, and your contract up against best in class and try to just negotiate with them and keep what you have in place. Hopefully that answered that question. Patrick Pine, I haven't heard from you in a long time. I hope you're well. I know you have seasonal workforce. So with multiple locations in multiple states, as opposed to a large employer with mostly full-time employees, what is the difference? I can't see the rest.
What is the difference you see in managing benefits for those two kinds of employers?
I really see there is a difference. Seasonal employees tend to have lower benefits, more cost to the benefits, and I do see them having lower adherence. So there are some significant things that you have to address within that population to manage your cost. I really think the key to seasonal workforce is making things affordable long term. So while they're on benefits during the season, they may be adherent to their medication. The concern that we have is that when they lose their benefits or their seasonal employment, they stop taking their medicines and they stop going to the doctors. So that is definitely a big concern. We do have some strategies, some gap fillers now, where people, we have an individual exchange, Patrick, where an employee can call into a number and we have an advocate that will help them find coverage on the state exchange, help them with what they qualify subsidy-wise to try to fill that gap when they lose their standard coverage to the employer when the season ends. Hopefully that answers that question. I don't see any more, Kelly, but I can't see the total bottom of the screen. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think that's it for today, and that's pretty much all the time we've got. But thank you so much, Marybeth. Excellent presentation, as always. And thank you, audience, for joining us today and participating with Marybeth. Please check out our website for 2016 conferences where you can come see Marybeth in person. And as soon as we end the meeting, we will have a survey pop up. You know we love surveys. Give us your feedback and your ratings on the webinar today. And look for those emails from University Conference Services and Marybeth in the next day or two. Again, thank you so much, Marybeth, and thank you, audience.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.